What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been here for about 20 years, and today I'm going to be just talking about the really basic but really complicated question of, is Japan a difficult place to live? And without any more preamble than that, let's get right into it. I'm going to start off with a brief profile of 4 types of people who probably will not find Japan to be their liking or to be their long-term home. The first type is pretty obvious. It's someone who really loves their home country, someone who just has a great relationship with their family, that they don't want to be away from them, or have wonderful friends that they're going to miss so much, or never really feel like they're going to be away from their home country for long. They're not going to stay in Japan for the long term. It's just going to be too different. The second type of person, and I've met quite a few of these here, you get the sense that they're never going to be happy anywhere they are. Anything that happens, the slightest problem that happens, it's like the end of the world. All of the little microaggressions build up like paper cuts until they can't take it anymore. And basically, you get the feeling that they could be in France, or they could be in India, or they could be in Australia, and it wouldn't make any difference. They're going to be bothered by just about everything in a foreign society, and maybe even in their own home society. A third type of person who Japan is probably not right for is someone who has really particular, strong opinions about what is right, how things should be done, how things should not be done in a society, and they have just really strong convictions about those things. And guess what? Japan is like that too. Japanese society has very strong views about what's right, what is wrong, how things should be done, how things shouldn't be done, and you're going to clash very strongly if your viewpoints are different than that. I told a story of my brother-in-law Bob a few videos ago, and I mentioned that he has very strong views about how things should be. For one thing, if things aren't absolutely perfect in a customer service sense, he's going to complain every single time. He also believes highly in customization, so the Japan habit of the omakase culture of the chef is right. He couldn't accept that. He wanted to substitute everything, even in small mom and pop restaurants. Not suitable for long-term life in Japan, because it's going to be a constant fight. The fourth type of person for whom Japan is not right is someone who is already greatly troubled in their life in some way. Perhaps they have depression, perhaps they have really horrible issues in their social life or with their family, and they feel like maybe moving to Japan is going to be some kind of escape. Problem with that is, if you're depressed, if you have these social issues, a lot of times those things are going to travel right along with you, and you're now playing on hard mode in a new culture and a new language, and so you're going to add in culture shock and those sorts of things on top. Not recommended, to be perfectly honest. You kind of want to already be in a good place, a happy place to come to Japan. And there are some caveats to that, like people who are very introverted can find Japan a very nice place to live, whereas like America would be much harder to live. So yeah, I do know some people who are very introverted who found Japan to be an escape for them from American life. So I'm not saying that's a blanket statement, but at any rate, Japan can be a very hard escape because, like I mentioned, it's going to make everything harder potentially, because suddenly you're going to be thrust in different social situations that you're not going to understand what's going on, and in a language that you probably don't speak. Okay, first of all, a big idea about a country being easy or difficult. It's going to be nice to frame this in a way of comparison to other countries that you might live or move to abroad. If you're from North America and you move to Canada from the US or vice versa, that's super easy mode. Same language, very similar culture. I mean, what is really going to change if I moved to Canada? I suppose I'd have to choose a favorite hockey team and start loving Tim Hortons. Not a huge shift, honestly. And if I move to Europe, yes, now I'm dealing with different culture and different language, but even then you're still kind of on easy mode because they're very related cultures, very related languages, and especially you can read them when you're in Europe. You may not know what the words mean, but they're using the same alphabet, unless of course you're in Eastern Europe, but even there it's still like an alphabet that you can learn. It's not like learning thousands of kanji to be able to read in Japan. And I'll get into the language issue here a little bit later. So where is Japan in the comparison to other nations? Well, As far as in Asia, I would call it an Asian starter country. It's one of the easiest places to live in Asia first if you're coming from the West. Singapore is probably right up there too. Not a terribly difficult place to live if you're from the West, like Europe or North America. Now, I didn't realize this at first until I traveled to some of the other Asian countries. For example, when I visited my friend in Shanghai, and this is not recent, really developed Shanghai, this was 2003, in the midst of the huge development boom, Shanghai. I'd been living in Japan for a year, and I thought, okay, China is practically next door. I'll probably find it relatively comfortable because I'd really already settled into Japan by then and was having a great time. But I found China to be a completely different world. It was suddenly a whole nother level of adventure and excitement, and I had a great time. Don't get me wrong, but I do remember thinking this would be a much harder place to adjust to. So as a starter country in Asia, definitely Japan is not all that difficult in comparison to a lot of others. And then we're not even going to talk about super developing countries, like if we're getting into some places in the African continent, etc. Japan is going to be a relatively easy place to live. Now, what actually makes Japan a difficult place to live? Well, I already mentioned language, and that's probably the big one. Japanese is not easy to learn. It's on the top of the list when it comes to the US State Department's rankings of difficult languages to learn, with only Arabic and Korean, and I think one other language being higher than Japanese as difficult to learn. Now, Japanese is not a difficult language to pronounce. There's only a couple of new things you kind of got to get a hold of to pronounce Japanese, and neither of those are difficult. Sure, there are tone and intonation things that are going to be hard to pick up because you don't have them in English, and they're even hard to hear, and they're going to always kind of be part of your accent as a foreigner speaking Japanese. For example, long oo sounds. I still have real trouble hearing the difference between the names Yuki and Yuki. Or certain words, there's a lot of homophones, these words that sound really similar to each other, like kite, and kite, which even just saying them right now, I'm not even sure I did them right because I don't always have confidence in that. And of course context helps, but there are a lot of those homophones, and so you end up with sometimes difficulty understanding. Like my mother-in-law once said that she was going to the Byoin, and Byoin is hair salon and Byoin is hospital, and I misheard her and I thought she was going to the hospital. I was like, well, why are you going to the hospital? She's like, to get my hair done. And okay, the Byoin. So that's a thing, and the aforementioned kanji, or the writing, is obviously a great difficulty simply because you can't read it. Like if I'm in Italy, I can read the signs. I might not know what they say, but I can read them. Here, if I don't read the kanji, if I don't know what the kanji is, I can neither read it nor know what the meaning is. Although there's some exceptions to that, but I won't get into that. That's for a language learning video sometime in the future. So language, first and foremost, is a big difficulty. Second, you're going to have trouble with society here in the same way that you have trouble with society in any country, and that is there's difficulties that occur throughout the year that you're going to have to deal with. And in Japan, you have the added language barrier on top of that, like paying taxes, like figuring out health insurance issues, figuring out how to find things in Japanese on the internet. So these are things that will make a few things in life a lot more difficult, on occasion. Another difficulty about Japan is living, in terms of finding an apartment or a place to rent, because, well, first of all, it's very expensive. Anytime you move here, there's a plethora of fees and other things that you have to pay. Not to mention there is still an institutional discrimination that allows places to refuse renting to foreigners, so that is a difficulty that you might encounter. And of course, there is also institutional discrimination of other sorts. I'm actually going to make a video about that specifically in the future. Official forms of discrimination in Japan, not microaggressions or other small things, but actual things that are in codes and in law and in rule books. that exists that discriminate against foreign people. I'll make that video in the future. Okay, the one final one I will add on here is what makes Japan potentially difficult is if you are female. Women here are going to have different problems than men, and basically every foreign female friend that I have has talked about the molestation or the catcalls or all of the things that, yes, women have to deal with in a lot of countries around the world, but in Japan there's this added layer of fascination of, you know, if you are a blonde or brunette white woman, or people who are really into African women or something like that. And there is a stronger, dare I say, more prevalent level of stalking in this country that can happen. And I mean, to put it in perspective, I've had more than one female friend tell me that they've just been propositioned in the train or on the street like they're some kind of streetwalker, like, can I pay you for sex sort of thing, because there's this image that foreign women are easy and will just have sex with anyone or something like that. And of course, that's not saying all Japanese guys think that, but there is a segment of society that really misunderstands foreign women, and I really don't know anyone who hasn't faced that kind of harassment at some point while they've been living in Japan. Okay, on that happy note, let's actually get into the easy things about being in Japan. And one of them is you don't have to learn Japanese. Actually, you can live in an English language bubble and get along really nicely here. And that is tied to another reason why Japan is an easy place to live. People basically leave you alone and they don't harass you about not being able to speak Japanese or not being able to do something correct in terms of the culture or society, because one of the prevailing attitudes is, well, foreigners can't understand Japan, or foreigners don't know what to do, so they get a kind of pass, like, oh, that person's a foreigner, they did a wrong thing or they broke a rule, it's because they're a foreigner, they don't know any better. And the other thing is the culture in Japan is they don't call you out on it. You can do something, a bad manner, or break some rule, and no one's going to get in your face and be upset with you about it. Not like if you were in New York or LA, where people will get into your face for no reason whatsoever. So being left alone makes Japan a very easy place. I mentioned introverts finding a lot of comfort being in Japan. The other ones are really just related to the fact that Japan is a developed country. There's great infrastructure. The trains run on time. It's incredibly safe here. All of these things lead to a very simple, easy existence. You can get around easily. You can get places, you know, it's not difficult to find anything anymore because you have a smartphone. In this day and age, you can order just about anything from Amazon or Rakuten or other import websites. And if you're in a city like Yokohama or Tokyo, you're going to find a lot of things that are import goods from your home country. I mean, it depends on your country, of course, but if you're from the US, you'll certainly find a lot of things here. And quite a number of European countries enjoy the luxury of having a lot of their products imported into Japan. Far more so than when I first arrived back in 2002. There's very little left that I've ever looked for online now that I thought, oh, I wonder if I can get a hold of blah, 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 and then was not able to. Pretty much everything is at hand now. And it's just a highly functioning, structured, ordered society. And once you understand the social norms and the social rules, it's very easy to fit in and be accepted. The Japanese who know you and know you're not a tourist and know you know the culture and actually take care to learn the rules and follow them, well, you become accepted in society for that. So it's not a country that's going to always hold you at arm's length. I mean, yes, people who don't know you, people who do have racist tendencies exist, of course, but even then, it's not an in-your-face sort of thing. It's kind of held quietly to your chest, and maybe the outlet is online chat forums and that sort of thing. I've never been confronted on the street or yelled at because I was a foreigner in that sort of open sense. And never once was I told, you need to learn Japanese or something like that, which is totally what you could get in America, with Americans saying, you need to learn English. So I have one more category, and that's what makes Japan moderately difficult. And one of those things is being accepted. And that goes back to what I just said about people who don't know you are just going to assume you're a foreigner who doesn't live here, who's a tourist, who doesn't know what to do, doesn't speak the language, etc. So you have a lot of the same conversations over and over again, where someone realizes you speak Japanese, and then the first question is, well, how long have you lived in Japan? And there's certain conversations I've had in Japan hundreds of times, probably. So, I mean, I guess I can't call that difficult. Moderately annoying, maybe. There's two more that I would add to the moderate difficulty level, and one of them is standing out. You do really have a lack of privacy as a foreigner. When you ride the train, it won't seem like anyone's looking at you or watching you, but they are. They're watching everyone. Japan is a society that kind of keeps an eye on its own and definitely keeps an eye on foreigners, and as a foreigner, you're always going to stand out. I can't tell you how many times I've had people peek into my supermarket basket to see, oh, what is the foreigner buying? Or, children pointing at me and saying, yo, mama, a foreigner. And I've had, students from my university will just see me on the street. I won't notice them because they're just in the crowd of Japanese people and I'm not really paying attention, but boom, I stand out. So I'll have students say, hey, you were on the west side of Yokohama Station last Thursday, or like, hey, we saw you in that Irish pub on Sunday night, or whatever it might be. And, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you saw me. So a lot less privacy to be expected. And there's going to be people, especially if you're in a small town, you're working as an ALT or an Eikaiwa teacher or something in a smaller village out somewhere in Japan, there's going to be, everyone's going to know who you are, and you're not going to know everyone. So that means that wherever you go, whatever you do, people are going to know that, oh, our new ALT, assistant language teacher, was in the supermarket today, and after that they went to the ramen shop next door. And like, it's not necessarily that they're going to be gossiping about you, but because you stand out and everyone knows who you are, you don't have privacy in those situations. You simply don't. If you go on a date with someone, even like a couple towns over, word's gonna get around. Let's just put it that way. All right, I'm gonna start heading back to my train station, but I wanna add one more, and it's similar to me bringing up the issue of being female in Japan. If you are of a kind of seen as less interesting or less desirable foreigner based on nationality or even skin color, you can find life to be harder here. I mean, the example I always give for this is my friend John from America, but he's Vietnamese American. And when people would first meet him and he'd use his so-so Japanese, he was always quick to introduce himself as being from America, because he found out very quickly that if they assumed him to be Southeast Asian, he received a lot less kind of friendliness and respect than after he started always introducing himself very quickly as an American. Oh, you're an American, okay. And then it created a different relationship vibe. And so that's something to be aware of. That said, I know people here who are from Nigeria. I know people here who are from Vietnam, and other Asian countries and other African countries who absolutely love it here. And I think that goes back to being the type of person that's going to let those sorts of situations and comments just kind of roll off your back. You're not going to let the microaggressions bother you, and then you can live in Japan very, very comfortably. Okay, in summary, basically, overall, I would just say, and so the too long didn't read version is, Japan is a very easy country to live. Not as easy as Canada or say France or something like that, but as far as what Americans might see as an exotic country is, Japan is one of the easier countries to live. But it's not for everyone. There's people who are definitely not going to enjoy living here for any number of reasons. So I'm not saying easiness equals you're going to have a great life here. But in terms of how to get by in your day-to-day, Japan is not a difficult place to live overall. Agree or disagree? Let us know in the comments below. I really love seeing, reading, and responding to the comments. I'm still happy that I'm a small channel and I don't have to miss comments. I pretty much respond to everything these days. If I've missed your comment in the past, I apologize. That does happen, but I really like to join in the conversation. If you live here, let us know what you agree with on what I said or what I missed. And remember to like and subscribe if you would be so kind to do so. But at any rate, I really want to thank you very much for watching this particular video. Remember to check out my Instagram and my podcast. I will link them both below, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.